Me. It's not morning for Akela. Hi, Akela. How are you doing?
I am good, thank you. It is evening.
Yes, because you're in Berlin, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the sun unfortunately set a while ago because it's winter.
Yeah, it is. Mute that so I can. Oh, yeah, in the northern hemisphere, short days.
Yep.
So, what do I usually do here? Sorry, Akela's been dealing with this for a while. I'm a little bit out of it today. Do you want to talk a little bit about what it is that you do and how Raza users might have come in contact with you before?
hmm Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I am the head of the customer success engineering team at Raza, which is the team that's responsible for supporting our customers from a technical perspective mainly. Yeah, I mean, I've been with Raza for over 3 years now, for quite a while. So I've done a lot of different things at Raza, and I think most of you from the community probably know me through the forum and GitHub. I used to be one of the only people responding to questions there. Now I still occasionally do it, but yeah, I think that's where most of you will have come across me before.
Definitely. And when you say Raza customers, um, do you want to talk a little bit about how one would become a Raza customer and not just a user? Because I think a lot of our audience tends to be more on the developer side and may not be familiar with sort of our enterprise offerings.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so yeah, becoming a Raza customer. So we primarily work with organizations that are in the Fortune 500 or Global 2000s. So kind of bigger enterprise teams who are working on mission critical assistance. So, for example, we have a few customers in the banking industry who, yeah, just offer their customer service through or automate some of their customer service through a Raza bot. So those are the kind of customers we work with. Yeah, and from a product perspective, I think most of you are familiar with Raza X, and on top of that, we have an enterprise offering basically, which has some features that are specifically relevant to the enterprise, and yeah, and of course that also comes with support from our team.
Like you.
Yes,
You offer some of the support.
exactly.
Ganesh Madan say hi. Hello back to y'all. Welcome to the stream. And let's pull up a couple of forum questions to get started. And while I'm doing that, question for you. So you said you've been here for about 3 years, which for us is a pretty young company. That's been a while.
Yeah.
What change has happened that users know about, not necessarily like internal organizational stuff, are you most excited about that's happened in the last 3 years? The one thing that you're like, yeah, you did that real good.
That is God. That is a big question. 3 years. We've done a lot of stuff. Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know. I feel like there's been a lot of milestones that we hit over the past 3 years, especially well with our products, which is obviously what the community sees. I mean, releasing Raza X as a free product was a huge thing. That kind of existed before as just for our enterprise users, but we decided to launch that to the community as well because we thought everybody needs tools to help them build better assistants. So I think that was definitely a highlight. And apart from that, I would also say, I don't know, I'm very proud of the Raza open source 2.0 release that we did. I think there's a lot of stuff that went in there that came as feedback directly from the community as well. And I think that's kind of the most important thing, making sure we're solving problems that users are actually facing.
Oh, definitely. Speaking of users facing problems, feel free to ask questions in the chat. And Bob says hello as well. Oh, and we have our first question. All right.
Amazing.
Can two mutually exclusive stories be stitched together through augmentation? Let's say you have a Boolean flag based on which you are greeting users differently. So you have two greeting stories.
Wait. I'm not sure I fully understand this question. Um, so you have two different greeting stories, and are you asking whether the user can kind of ask them like subsequently, or what? Not sure. I fully know how to answer that.
No, it's a good question. So this is from Madan. So there's a follow-up part of the question. How do you actually see augmented stories? I think it's more of a question about augmentation.
Okay. Augmented stories. So yeah, I mean, by default, Raza open source will augment your stories with some, yeah, by stitching together a bunch of different stories. That can be turned off with a flag as well, or you can, kind of augment it more a bit. I believe that you used to be able to dump these augmented stories into a file. It was a flag called -- dump flattened stories, I think, but I'm not sure you can still do that now. But I think that's something we need to find out in the docs.
Let's go to the docs. So could you repeat what that flag was?
If you search for flattened stories, I think. Yeah, that was. Yes.
It's in the changelog, which
is not promising, is it?
Yeah, it's not.
Okay, we've removed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that doesn't exist anymore. Well, unless you're using a version pre 1.8. I think, yeah, at the moment, I'm not sure you actually can do this. I think we plan to reintroduce this at a different stage in the pipeline at some point, but I'm not 100% sure whether we have. Yeah. Generally speaking, though, your bot shouldn't be learning any behavior you kind of haven't designed for by augmenting stories. Yeah.
So if you had a situation like this where you had, let's say, two different greetings and a person would never see both, or a user would never see both, would you recommend having two stories, one with greeting one and then the rest of the conversation, and then one with greeting two and the rest of the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, you could write two like separate whole stories, or you can also write a story that just has this greet turn in it. It kind of depends on what happens after that. If it's really just you want a different greeting for each user, then you can write either a very short story or a rule, which is a feature in 2.0. And then just have the rest of the interaction go as normal. But if you do want to, if the rest of the flow of the conversation depends on this kind of first greeting, then you would want to write two separate full stories.
So you could also have just a rule that picks the right greeting based on the flag as part of the story. Exactly. If you're using 2.0.
Yes. Or which I hope a lot of people are.
Just upgrade. It's great. Question from Ganesh not on 2.x, from also 1.8.x onwards. Oh, I guess it is. Whenever there's a fallback intent identified, it always sets the confidence of the identified intent to the threshold and all else to 0. Is this intentional?
Of the intent, sorry? It sets the confidence to the
fallback intent is identified. The confidence of the identified intent is set to the threshold, and everything else is set to 0. All the other intents, I believe, is what that's saying.
Is this when there's an NLU fallback or a dialogue management fallback? Because I think for the NLU fallback, at least, I don't think we modified.
Fallback action. Sorry, there's additional information now.
A fallback action. Okay. So the confidence for, if it is a fallback of the dialogue management, then yes, the confidence is just set to the threshold. And that is intentional because, just because the model was unsure. And at that point, you just set it to this confidence to make sure that the fallback action gets executed properly. But as for an NLU fallback, I think we don't modify. The confidence is there. What we do since 2.0 is we overwrite the intent with an NLU fallback intent. so that you can handle this more easily in your stories.
So, yes, that is intentional. Thank you for the question, Ganesh. I hope that helped. Madan says, since they're mutually exclusive, so this is talking about you have two different possible greetings, you're going to pick one of them, they should not be augmented. Oh, so given this information, it sounds like the question might be, we have two things that are mutually exclusive. What if they get, stuck together during data augmentation and users can do things that we weren't expecting or planning for?
Well, so I mean, if you want to avoid it being augmented completely, I would really say you should use rules because those don't go through story augmentation. But also, your user is only going to be able to go down that path if like the slot gets set differently. And I don't know what your slot gets set, like what kind of happens externally for the slot to get set. But I would imagine that if it's a different type of user, the slot isn't going to randomly be set to a different value.
Yeah, I'm probably not going to suddenly become a new user and a returning user.
Yeah, exactly.
So good question, thank you. And the clarification was helpful as well. And Julian Gerhard, hey Julian, says, why are they mutually exclusive if they differ? So I think that's about that, like, a person's not going to have two qualities, is based on my sort of understanding of the question. Yeah. Ganesh says, question 2, is there a recommended number of intents you should be defining? I have about 5,000 examples of my training sets, and we have roughly 1,000 examples coming in daily.
Are you talking about number of intents or number of examples per intent?
Yeah.
And follow-up question, all those examples you have as part of your intents, are those have you generated those, or are those kind of real user messages?
There's a second part of the question that says, of those 1,000 examples, so that are coming in every day, there are about 600 examples that we want the bot to identify as a non-fallback intent. So based on that additional information, it sounds like the question is more about how many training examples do you want per intent? Yes, number of utterances. So yes, clarifying additionally. Thank you so much. I know the chat mechanism is a little bit hard for dialogue.
Okay, yeah, so number of utterances per intent. Okay, yeah, I mean, this very much depends on the number of intents you have and also how different these intents are to each other. As like a baseline rule, we always say you should have at least 20 examples per intent. So just before, moving forward with your bot at all. But yeah, obviously that number should be increasing regularly as you kind of have your bot interact with users more, and also as you add more intents. So yeah, there's not really a kind of straight answer I can give you there, but yeah, I would say it's super important that you add a lot of real user utterances to your data, which is something Raza X helps you with. Yeah, because that just, it reflects what your users are actually saying in production. And that means your NLU model ends up being more accurate. I think with the amount of examples you mentioned, 5,000, I don't know if this is per intent or not. Does it say that?
5,000 in the training set, and then 1,000 examples coming in daily.
Okay, sounds like 5,000 might be overall. Yeah, okay. But yeah, it depends on how many intents you have, whether that's too many or too little, I think.
Yeah, I would recommend, if you're unsure, training a model, running sort of some of the tests, looking at the machine learning output, adding some more training examples, and then seeing, if you're continuing to get improved performance. And at the point when, you're getting less improved performance, then the amount of work?
There is actually some functionality like Raza open source where you can kind of exclude certain percentages of your training set and run. Basically, you can choose to exclude, like, I don't know, 10%, 20%, and see how like your F1 score and stuff varies based on that. So that's kind of also a good way to check whether you should be adding more examples or whether you're, or whether you should even do, I don't know, don't need to add anything else. I think I'm trying to think what to search for in the Raza docs, but maybe if you just search comparison.
Let's see. Print comparison, I don't think that's that. Train comparison models?
Yes, but I think this should also be
policies.
There should be. Maybe this is just for stories.
Exclusion percentages.
Maybe this is just for stories. Well, my bad if it is just for stories. Yeah.
Let's see if this exclusion percentage is used anywhere else.
Just. Oh, where does, under building assistance, maybe. Oh no, you can do it with.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so you can test multiple configurations, and I think if you scroll down further, it should also be different amounts of training data.
Yeah. Okay, so you can do a train test split, exclude a certain percentage of data from the global train split. Yeah. So a good way to test if this is going to. Buddy, you have got to settle down. Sorry, my dog is on my chair behind me. And the deal was he couldn't move, and he is moving a lot. Yeah. So I would, try seeing how much data you can remove, or if removing data changes your results. And if it doesn't, then you probably have enough training data for now. Marco says, that's a teaching class? Yeah, or just answering questions if you have them. So hopefully that helps. And then this is in rasa.com/doc/raza/testing your assistant #comparing NLU pipelines. All right, and Jack. Oh wow, there's a lot of questions.
Oh, nice.
Jack says, I have a question on connecting WhatsApp to Raza X through Twilio. Is it only reserved for HTTPS and not HTTP connections? How do I switch to secure HTTPS if so?
I don't know whether it's only for HTTPS connections. That's something you have to check on the Twilio docs, I think. But you should, with Raza X, if you provide a certificate to Nginx, then it should be a secured connection. And I think there is some documentation we have around that on the Raza X docs. You need to.
I am too zoomed in. Wait, am I?
You're on Raza Open Source?
There we go. Okay.
Oh.
I was like, definitely you used to be able to like.
Yeah.
I was just real zoomed in.
Yeah, I think if you search for SSL or something like that, it should be in there somewhere.
Ooh, am I dropping frames? My local internet appears to be not very good.
Oh boy.
So hopefully I have enough cache that it's not going to be a problem. Yeah, so this is loading.
Okay, well.
And I would check the Rasa X docs.
Yeah. Yeah, if you search for something like SSL, then you should be able to find it. It's just a matter of generating either you have a certificate or you generate one with something like Let's Encrypt and provide it to the Nginx container. So that would be, using Raza X in server mode rather than local mode, obviously. Yeah.
Hopefully it helps, Shock. Question from Madan. So, I have a Boolean flag is registered. It has a default false. I'm seeing slot is registered 0, 1, and slot is registered 1, 1 in the same tracker state. It does not make sense. So the slot is registered 0, :1, slot is registered 0 is all one thing.
Okay.
So they're
So the value of the slot changes during the conversation, I guess.
that makes sense. Now that you say that out loud, I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure. I think you need to see what's going on in your stories. But I mean, how does the, slot get modified? Is that through like a custom action or something? Or is it based on something the user says?
I would maybe, Madan, I don't know that we're going to be able to troubleshoot this over the chat. I would ask on the forum. And I don't have a forum pop up. The Raza forum. I'll pull it up in another tab. I have a GitHub pop up. Oh, there it is. I do have a forum pop up. Yay.
Nice.
So I would take that question to the forum so that you can share the tracker information and we can take a little bit of a closer look. I think that'll be more helpful for your particular question. Faiza says, hi Faiza. Can we use something other than .txt, such as CSV, MD, or YAML, in the lookup for entities?
Currently, no. I think it's just a .text file. Yeah, I mean, feel free to open a feature request on the GitHub repository and we can kind of discuss whether that would make sense or not.
I don't have my GitHub pop up, but it's the Raza HQ GitHub. And you can also, I mean, it's a little bit hacky, but you can convert, those other types of files into flat text files.
Yeah, cool.
Question from Ahmad. I scrolled and just lost. I migrated from 2.0 to 2.1 following the Raza migration guide. After the migration, Raza X stopped recording incoming questions. Both the Raza and Raza X servers are running.
Okay. That is a tricky one. I think it's worth checking the compatibility matrix on the Raza X docs to see if those. I mean, I don't know what version of Raza X you're on either, actually. So, well, yeah, 0.33 is compatible with 2.0, 0.34 with 2.1. So make sure those are compatible. If that's not the issue, then I think creating a forum post for that is best as well, because we probably need to look into some of your logs to see what's happening.
Yeah, so hopefully it's a simple update thing. And if not, let us have more information, and we'll try and figure it out. Okay. And Harrison says, responding to Jacques, who asked about the HTTPS certificate. So thank you, Harrison. Ganesh, follow up to question 2 about the number of training examples. Other than changing the pipeline training set, what else can we do to get the best performance for our bot? There are diminishing returns for adding to the training set.
Yeah, so I would say, I mean, the number one thing to do is run kind of something like either cross-validation or test your NLU model on a test set, and see what intents are, if there's any intents that are kind of confused with each other a lot, or if there's any ones that have a particularly low score or something, and then you make changes based on that. For example, if there's two intents that are kind of confused with each other a lot, then it's possible that you have two fine-grained intents and you might need to turn it into one and make some changes based on that. I would say, this confusion matrix and so on is the best thing to look at. And even before, kind of, tweaking the pipeline too much, I think it's always super important to just, make sure your training data is of really high quality. So like I mentioned before, I think, I obviously don't know what your training data looks like, but making sure you have a lot of real user messages in there is important. Generating training data with tools like Chatito isn't something we generally recommend because it ends up overfitting to various sentence structures, and yeah, it is bound to have lower performance at some point.
And just to clarify, I know we were just looking at a different matrix that was about compatibility. This is confusion between classes and intents.
Yeah.
And I know these labels are small. So,
There,
and I would agree with Akela. If you've added more training data and you've done some tweaking and you're still not getting great results, I would change the way that you're asking your questions. And in general, the fewer intents you have, the better performance you'll have. Just because fewer classes are easier to sort things into. Is that the new free lunch theorem? There's a statistical theorem about this that I can never remember the dang name of, but it's out there. All right. A little bit more chat about Engine X. Ganesh says, question 3. It sounds like you're working on a really complex project. How do you label utterances fulfilling multiple intents? Do you label an utterance as having at least one of intent A and at least one of intent B, or do you name your intents based on how many times they occur in an utterance, etc.? So like intent A, intent B, intent A. So if someone was like, hello, great, I want to buy a TV, one intent, and also cancel my magazine subscription, third intent. How do you deal with that?
It depends whether you want to handle things differently if your user is asking for multiple things. So I mean, in this example that you mentioned, Rachel, I think in that case you would want to handle things differently. But I think sometimes you might not care if the user kind of says, "Hi, I want to do this thing." Then you just say, "Okay, hey, let's do this." But yeah, if you have something like, "Hi, I would like to open a bank account and also transfer money," then I would say that is something you should label with 2 intents. We have a section on multiple intent labels in the docs as well, I think. Or maybe it's multi-intent. Oh no, there you go. I think that was.
Oh, it did.
Yeah. Read more about how to use multiple intent.
There we go.
Yeah. So yeah, there's this. You can use this format where you do thank plus goodbye, and there's some tokenization that will featurize your intent labels as well. So you can handle this as a separate intent and then write stories to address both questions, and then you can decide how you want to handle that best, whether you want to just make the user do one thing first, or you want to ask them which one they want to do first. That's entirely up to you. I will say when it comes to multi-intents, definitely don't kind of assume that you're going to need these. So don't artificially generate combinations of every single intent that you have. I'd say really judge that based on what your users are saying as well. If you see a lot of people want to do 2 things at once, then it makes sense to create an intent for it, but otherwise it doesn't.
Yeah, helpful. I hope that answers your question. And then Madan still talking about those the slots where we had the true value being true and the false value also being true.
Yes.
The slots are only set during action session start. Madan says, related to the form, how do I get attention to a question, or should I file a bug if that's the only explanation so far?
How do you get attention? It depends how long you posted your question ago. We generally try to answer them within 3 days.
3 business days. That does not include weekends.
Days, yeah, just a weekend. So yeah, if it hasn't been that long yet, then just give it a bit more time, and we can. I'm sure someone will get back to you. But yeah, if you're not getting a response at all and you think it might be a bug, then raising an issue on the GitHub repository is also an option. I think so. You said it only gets set during action session start. So it is possible that you have multiple action session starts for one sender ID just because of session timeout. There's a configuration in Raza open source that you can set for a new session to start with a user after a certain amount of time, because a lot of the time you probably want the conversation to be wiped after, I don't know, a day or maybe even after an hour or something. So it's possible that that's a reason, but I don't know why the slot. Well, I don't know. I'm not sure about how your bot works in terms of it having, that slot having two different values.
In a more general sense, I will say that I personally know that I answer questions more quickly if people have like pasted their code examples, talking very like in a clear way about what their question is, hear what I've already tried. Yeah, just like if it's easier for me to answer, yeah. I'm probably gonna answer it a bit faster because sometimes I open a question, I'm like, oh, this is gonna take an hour, and then I like shelve it towards the end of the deadline. So that's me.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, the more details you provide, the easier it is for us to help you as well.
And Ahmed talking about the compatibility matrix says it is compatible. Yeah, so that sounds like there might be a bug. And this was about the responses not being saved in Raza X after the update.
Yeah, I think opening a post on the forum is your best bet there. I don't know of any bugs off the top of my head that might cause that.
Yeah, I would also like to know if that's a new bug.
Yeah, that would be good for us.
And then we have wrapping up for Nash. So it sounds like they're heading out. The multiple intents in the docs do not specify in the intent should be used as flags or should be used as a count. It's unfortunately very common in our production examples to have multiple intents. Okay, so this does sound like something that you're going to want to do.
Yeah. So I don't know if I got the question though.
So in the docs, it does not specify the intents should be used as flags or should be used as a count for multiple intent.
Count as in like a count or account?
A space COUNT.
Okay, sorry, I got a count. No, a flag or as a count? I still don't know.
I mean, in terms of where you put them in your assistant, you would treat them like another intent, right? That you would have like label of the intent and then examples of things.
Yeah.
And then you just make sure that you have the split symbol that you've defined in your config file between your thing. So here, this config file, the split symbol is an underscore. So here, you would, instead of thank plus goodbye, have thank underscore goodbye, and then examples of intents where people are like, thanks, bye. Thank you so much. Toodles. Yeah. That worked. Talk to you later. That sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. They're basically a separate intent.
I hope that helps. It's an office hours. It is an office hours, Marco says. Habib says, how does Raza store current chat context? And how about connecting multiple instances of Raza from a single context storage?
Yes. Okay, that is a good question.
2 questions.
Yeah, so context is stored in the form of the tracker store. By default, that's run just kind of kept in memory, but yeah, let me wait for you to pull this up actually, so people know what those are.
Oh,
really?
Wowee.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah, so by default, this history is kept in memory, which obviously for a production environment is not what you should do. So if your bot is in production, it's, you can customize it to persist this context to a database. So with Raza X, that gets persisted to an SQL database, but you can do that with any of the ones listed on here, or even a custom one if you want to build that. So yeah, that's how Raza maintains context. And as for connecting multiple Raza open source instances to one tracker store, you can do this. What you should additionally configure though is a lock store, which we also have some documentation for. And what this lock store does is make sure that no, like, I don't know, two Raza open source instances, for example, aren't processing the same conversation at once or doing it out of order or something. But yeah, if you have both those things, a persistent tracker store and a persistent lock store, then you should be good doing that.
Hopefully, that sets you up for success. Habib. All right. Other questions. I'm wondering if I missed some in the chat because sometimes I do that, and I am sorry. I never intend to, but it's a lot to pay attention to. Seeing how vented stays. More discussion. Production examples. This mystery with the slots being changed. Habib says thanks. Marco is watching the GitHub Universe stuff. It looks like we don't have any open questions just at the second. So I am wondering. Oh, sorry, Akela. I just noticed that you can't see this, but your name tag on the stream has been like, oh, so is mine. Slightly off center. Let's fix those. There we go. Sorry. A question from Baby Ha says, is Raza completely working from home?
Yeah, we are at the moment. Yeah, I think, yeah, during the summer we had our Berlin office was partially open because yeah, cases were down a bit here, but at this point we are all at home. At some point we'll go back to well, at least the Berlin team will go back to the office. The rest of the team is distributed across mainly the US.
I think the only places we have like physical offices are Berlin, Edinburgh, and we used to have one in San Francisco, but I don't know that we have a physical address anymore.
At the moment, I think the only one we have is Berlin. Edinburgh will open when it's okay to open offices again, and maybe San Francisco as well again, but we're not sure about that yet.
And I will say, if this is perhaps a question for someone who's interested to applying to work at Raza, we are a remote first company, so the default expected work style is that you're going to be working remote, and everything is sort of built around that. So I've never worked from the Raza office. I've always worked from home, which did make the whole quarantine transition a lot more smooth for me personally.
Not for me, but
Parts.
I'm used to it at this point.
Wow, the Berlin office is very nice.
Yeah, I like it a lot.
All right, and question from Madan regarding the slot. So the slot being set twice, I'll file a bug. I have this issue when the slots have the right value, but the tracker has a flag true and false at the same time, and I have raised it. Yeah, it's a little bit funky. I was not able to pinpoint it, but I guess you agree that this should not happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll definitely take a look at the issue you submit.
Yes. Looks like we're in a little bit of a lull between questions. And so Akela, you work with a lot of our sort of bigger commercial questions people. Teams.
Question,
wow. Also questions. So my question for you is, having worked with people who are really scaling up assistants and having them be, really large and also really robust, what are the big pain points in that scaling process? Where do people tend to run into problems, and what would your recommendation be for people in that situation?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, I think generally speaking, I mean, a lot of the stuff around like lock stores and so on that went into these releases, those were kind of an outcome of just having a lot more people deploy their assistants to a large amount of people, making sure that just works from a scalability perspective. So people are getting responses quickly and so on. But yeah, in terms of like just scaling up your assistant, I think yeah, something to keep in mind always is build your assistant incrementally. Like I would say, yeah, start off with a few use cases and go from there, and see how how it's received by your end users. Make improvements based on that, and just build up the skills, etc. Based on the trends you see in these conversations. And especially like with a lot of these large customers, they have a huge user base and they kind of don't want to release the assistant to everyone at once in case there is some issues with it. So what they typically do is release it to say 1% of their user audience to kind of do a soft launch, see everything works. And that is, like I said, usually kind of a smaller set of skills to just see how that's received. And then as they make improvements and expand their skills, they just, they release it to larger and larger audiences, and eventually it gets released to the full user base.
Yeah, and I think that's a really striking change in design philosophy from sort of the way that chatbots were designed traditionally, where you'd have your state machine and you wanted to make sure that you had everything that you needed your assistant to do done before you shared it with people. So I think that especially a lot of people who have been working on them for a while, or maybe worked on virtual assistants a couple decades ago and are now coming back into the field, that might be something that is surprising for people to hear, that we recommend to like start with two things and then grow organic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it might save your team a lot of work as well. Like if you end up designing kind of 10 skills and 9 of them nobody wants to use, then yeah, that might be some time wasted. So by starting small, you kind of avoid this issue.
Yeah. And hopefully also it works better for people in addition to being easier for developers.
Yeah, of course. That's also important.
Baby House says, "Oh, it stinks that the office is closed. Great job keeping me motivated at home and staying professional." Oh, thank you. All right. So another question from Madan. I'm using augmentation for the following two situations. And actually, do you want to really quickly talk about what augmentation is for folks who haven't poked into it much yet?
Yeah, sure. So augmentation is something that happens to stories during training time. So if you're using either the memoization policy or the TED policy, Raza will by default perform so-called augmentation on your stories. And what that means is it stitches your stories together semi-randomly to just create more training data for the model to train on. Yeah.
So talking now that we're on the same page about what augmentation is, Madan is using it in two situations: human handover and for feedback. Since handover requests can come anytime, it does not make sense to have them as part of larger stories. And we have feedback built in many flows, so it does not make sense to write two paths for positive and negative feedback for all these flows.
So the handoff, so for the handoff and any sort of conversation pattern that you want to happen, that can happen at any point in a conversation, I would suggest writing a rule for that, because that's exactly what those are designed for. Those are designed for, things the user asks probably at any point in the conversation, and that should always get the same response. So in the case of a handoff, you always want to, well, either directly hand off the user or ask whether they want to be handed off. And for this kind of situation, you should write a rule for that. If you're on 2.0, again, or 2.1, that's a requirement. And what was the other one? Feedback.
Yeah, so positive or negative feedback. I almost feel like that would be a good place for a response selector.
A response selector.
If someone's like, because if you're responding to the type of feedback and people are like, I love the bot, or people are like, this just could work, I'm having a problem. Depending on what you're doing next there.
Yeah, I think it again depends whether you always just want, if somebody says, I hate your bot, you want to say, I'm sorry. If you just always want to do that, then yeah, you can use a response selector. You can also use a rule again. But if you want different things to happen based on what the context is of the conversation, then you would need to write these stories.
Hopefully that helps. Oh, I think it was actually another. Manon actually says we do have a response selector, but we anticipate them doing that manually. I skipped some parts of this question, so I'm using 1.0, so rules are not an option. I will check it out when we migrate. Yeah, I think 2.x might be a little bit more delightful for you, given the particular questions you're asking. Which, I mean, problems a lot of people had, which is why rules are a thing now.
Yeah, exactly. It's for these types of use cases. We just got a lot of feedback around that, so that's how rules were created.
Right, we got another question from Isak, maybe? Sorry if I'm saying anybody's names wrong. I'm trying to write a custom component for spell checking to use in a pipeline. In the process function, I use message.data square brackets text to get user message, but it returns none. How can I get the user message?
I believe this is dependent on what Raza version you're on as well. I'm gonna guess that it's, I don't actually know what the message object parameters are. I would guess it's message.text, but you can take a look as well. Not sure if in the API. It might be in the code reference, which, yeah, God, we're gonna be digging in there for a while.
dig.
Maybe I would say we search message, but I don't know if it's gonna get us there any faster. Probably under Raza.nlu. Maybe model. Nope. Or interpreter objects. Oh boy. Yeah, I think it might be easier to open a question on the forum as well. I would need to look that up myself first.
Yeah, and I would, if you ask a forum question, the Raza version would be super helpful there as well.
Yeah.
And also they have a second question. Can you please shed some light on why Raza 1.x is already considered legacy by Raza? What is the philosophy between deprecating versions so quickly? Thank you.
So I mean, I guess the word legacy is coming from the fact that we call it legacy docs for that version.
Yeah, I think so.
It's not that we don't kind of support it fully anymore or don't answer questions about it anymore. It's just, yeah. I mean, we moved it to the legacy docs URL because it's not the most up-to-date one anymore. The only thing that this means is we don't kind of ship new features for it. But we will still answer your questions around it and whatnot.
And I think a bigger question is, why did we not just like add rules and stuff to 1.11 and instead went with 2.0? You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that's because this is kind of a bigger change to the interior of Raza basically, and the HTTP interfaces and so on change. Like as soon as that happens, that warrants a major version. And a lot of other stuff we did is change the training data format, for example, as well. So all these kinds of things that just change the interfaces that you use to work with a Python package or well any piece of software, I guess, warrants a major version release. Because too much, if we release this in a minor, that would kind of signal that you can upgrade without a lot of stuff breaking. But if you just update your Python package to 2.0 now and don't kind of do some of the migration steps, then things might break.
Not gonna work.
Yeah, I think it does still technically work because we tried to make the transition as smooth as possible, but it's not kind of just out of the box. And yeah, it's just the expectations that come with these kinds of changes as well.
And then T-Tech is also asking about, so clarifying that the asking for the message text, they're using 2.0.
Okay.
So message.text returns a tribute error.
Right. Yeah, I know that this changed from 1.x to 2.x. We changed where that attribute is fetched from, but I don't know. Maybe, Rachel, if you search for message.text in the docs, I don't know if this is in a changelog somewhere. Apparently not. Okay.
Yes.
User message. Well, maybe actually. No. That's in the channel, not in the. No. This would be in the NLU. Yeah. Okay. I don't know. I think. Yeah, we can answer this question on the forum for you, but I do remember that this changed. I just don't know what it changed to.
So I'll get to that offline. Sorry about the confusing T-check. Madame says, I have some large stories which rely on 4 flags if I provide no slots. Do not set the flag before the start of the test. In the end-to-end test, it works, but if I do it in any combination, it does not. It would make sense even if the story was written for the default slots, but it's not. So when the end-to-end tests are passing, when I'm not setting them, and failing when I do. This just makes me think I do not know how to write the test. So it sounds like there's some base story. There's 4 sort of like variables. And the test works if they're not set in the test, and the text fails if those slots are set in the test.
I unfortunately think this is also something we can answer for examples. I mean, generally, yeah, if you set, this is a very general answer, if you set slots in your training data, then you need to make sure that's reflected in your test story as well. But yeah, I don't, for your particular use case, I think it'll help if we can see those tests and these stories.
Yeah, I'd take that to a forum question. One sec, I got the forum pop up. It's transparent. I spent a lot of time learning how to make transparent animations. I know Akela can't see it, but like Sarah comes up and says, forum URL, and then goes down. I'm proud of me. Sorry, my dog's feeling rowdy. Here, I'll show you the culprit. Ugh. Hello. You were so good until you weren't anymore.
That's okay. That's been almost an hour, so he's pay attention to me.
All right. Yeah. Oh, you love to make noises. Yeah, I've raised this end-to-end test issue on the above-mentioned ticket too. All the relevant information is there. Oh, like a link to a ticket or anything, but we can definitely check into it. Yeah, that's a little bit funky.
It is, yes.
So for folks who aren't familiar end-to-end testing is where you have basically you write out what the conversation to look like and what you expect your assistant to do, and when you change your assistant, the test should still run the same, right? You should still be able to handle the same conversation in the same way, even if you change some stuff. So it is surprising that setting the slots would break that.
Yep.
All right. Manon says, "Thanks for all the help." You're very welcome. I hope this helped. We've only got a couple minutes left, and I know Manon says it's not a little funky. It was as weird as it gets. Yeah. Yes, I would agree. That's not ideal. So something's upsetting Benson. Akela, before we wrap up, I was wondering if you had one piece of advice or recommendation for somebody using Raza, or just something exciting to keep an eye out for that might be looking up, that might be happening in the future, people should look out for, is what I meant to say there. What would you share with the Raza community?
Yeah, so I think something that is coming up in a future Raza X release, I can't tell you which one yet because I don't know, but since we've been talking a lot about how to improve your NLU model, something we're working on right now is bringing recommendations into Raza X. So kind of taking a look at your training data and what kind of predictions your model is making on user messages, and giving you some recommendations as to what you should look at changing in your training data. So I think that's something that's going to help a lot of people.
Definitely. Even today, we've had some questions where I think that would be really helpful. Manon says, in my 10-year experience, I've never been stuck on an issue for so long. Oh no.
Oh boy.
This sounds like this is end-to-end testing. Yeah. I hope we can resolve this for you. It sounds frustrating. All right, so it is about time. Thank you for joining today, Akela. I think this was really helpful for folks. Oh, I'm struggling today. English is my first language. Thanks so much for joining today, everybody, and asking questions. I hope we were able to help. Some quick programming notes. Tomorrow we are going to be reading a paper in the Raza paper reading group in this time slot. And actually, I was looking back through some of the streams, and I realized that we started a paper in July that we never finished. So I'm going to go back and finish that paper, which is Reformer Efficient Transformers. That's the name of the paper, about how to make transformers less memory and compute and space greedy. So we'll be working on that. And then on Friday, live coding, again, this time, same time slot, and I'm going to be working on, actually, we've been working on an assistant for a little bit, and I think it's about at the point where it's ready to share, so we're going to be sharing it on Raza X. So feel free to come and join for that if you would like. And that'll be the rest of this week. So I hope everybody has a great week. Thanks so much for joining, Akela. We'll be back next Wednesday with more office hours.